Hello, everyone. I won't going to say that the wait must have been long for you, but here I am, and today we'll talk about the earthquake in Turkey, or rather, our response to it. It's an awful tragedy, an awful tragedy that happened in neighboring country, brotherly country, and loss of life, a staggering loss of uh, livelihoods and cities. More than 30,000, 35,000 people have perished at the time of today, and I think more than 6 or 7,000 buildings have been destroyed, and countless streets, flats, and completely flattened. This is just enormous tragedy. I think that's probably the biggest tragedy that Turkey has ever faced, probably ever faced since last earthquake. And I mean, it's much, much bigger than the earthquake of 99 around Istanbul, and maybe similar to something that um, happened in 1931, 39, I think. And it's really enormous. Um, I'm geologist, but today I will not talk about the geological reasons for the earthquakes and whether you can expect one in Azerbaijan or not, because our channel is, this part of the channel is about critical thinking, comparing and contrasting. So I think it's very telling to read discussions about it in the press and various um, there was a lot of this kind of talk about compassion and how we are perhaps not as compassionate as we should be, or maybe some other countries are not compassionate as they should be towards Turkey, whereas we are very close. For us in Azerbaijan, this is an enormous tragedy. People here is shocked. There's a lot of people who perished from Azerbaijan, and Turkey is very close to Azerbaijan. So it is not surprising that we feel this very strongly, maybe not as strong as in Turkey, but it is an enormous tragedy. We are all affected. If you go away a little bit to other countries in Europe and then further afield, people are also very affected. But maybe some people feel that it's not necessarily so, and that daily lives are not that much different as before the earthquakes. And here there's some people, I mean, usually the population of the social media that have nothing better to say. They kind of say, well, why aren't you as shocked? Why the images of people perishing in Turkey, maybe not as close to you? And this is even more so related to Syria. There are some questions, say, why we do not feel the same affinity towards Syrians compared to Turks that are dying, and I think that have died. And it's a fair comment, and this is kind of what boils down to. We in Azerbaijan, for instance, do feel more. I wouldn't say we feel more compassion, but we feel closer, and that emotional closeness translates into more compassion and more kind of attention. There's also basically just more attention towards Turkey compared to Syria. And even though you would say, well, that's kind of crazy, it's just a boundary and people are all the same, and that is absolutely true. But just like with say a refugee crisis in or a Syrian civil war, it obviously affects the people who are close compared to the people who are far. There are two, and I think there are two camps. There are some people, I wouldn't call them bleeding heart liberals, but they're people who think they feel compassion more equalized towards everybody around the world, and they want social justice for everyone equally. But of course, they are lying to themselves. I don't think it is possible not to feel a close affinity to the one that is closer to you. I mean, it's basically one of those kind of affinity biases. So, for example, if you show a picture of a Turkish town before the earthquake, I think there was a picture of Hatay. It's quite a modern looking city with people that are very European looking, especially the people say if the women are without headscarves and people are generally modern looking. That creates a more shock and affinity to in the people who are perhaps more European. I think it just they feel that they are more connected they emotionally connected to the scene. And so obviously they compare the devastation that happened after, they're less so. And then if you kind of introduce a different kind of setting, maybe a bit more Middle Eastern, with people that maybe dress differently, of course it's still a huge tragedy. I mean, we're talking about small degrees here, but people are more removed. And of course, if it happens in Europe and you're in Europe, then you feel a lot more closer, because it just really touches you deeply, extremely deeply. The analogy would be that would you contemplate, or rather not contemplate, would you feel the same amount of grief if some of your relatives perished or a random person down the street fell? I think you would feel shock, but the amount of grief wouldn't be the same for you. It would be different. And the degrees are variable compared to how close that person is. So, talking about sort of universal altruism in this sort of human setting is an impossible task. And I just warn against that. And people who do it, I think they're disingenuous. They are disregarding what is human nature and just trying to force everything, on others. It is not possible. Now, I don't think it's kind of a gateway to discrimination. I don't think people should, discriminate on gender, sexuality, colors of skin, and all these things. But you'll have to just acknowledge that you will always feel closer to your kin compared to those that are a little further away. And artificially forcing this is very difficult. So just be aware of them. Yes, we're all created same, but to each other we're sometimes not equal. I think it's just an important learning, I feel, when we talk about the earthquake, and response to devastation. Now, some of the images and the images have the power to transcend this boundary, affect us very deeply. One of the most powerful images that probably moved a lot of people to allow refugees from Syria and civil war into Europe was an image of a small 3-year-old boy washed up ashore dead. And when I think he died when his parents were trying to cross Mediterranean, that affected people deeply because the image was so powerful. The same thing with earthquake damage and the people being pulled out of the rubble. These are so powerful that I think they transcend this. And same thing was the tsunami. But still, I think you would not completely disarm it, because you will still have more affinity towards those that are similar to you. And people do it not unconsciously, but it happens. So to me, it's just something that's in us. Now, the governments, of course, do not do that. I mean, once you create your second kind of, create, but once you start or your reflective mind, of course, which immediately starts, after the first reaction, you will act accordingly, no matter what and who these people are. And that's why the government sent firefighters and various groups of people to help with the earthquake damage reduction, from various countries. I think there was a lot of teams assembled, and people had put in a lot of people and collect money and help out irrespective of where they are. So I don't think that's a question. It's a question of our reactions. And also a lot of this is actually just a noise generated by the people on social media who have nothing better to do than complain. But unfortunately, this is kind of the discussion level that happens. And I think if you put your critical reasoning on display, just explain that it doesn't really mean that the person is bad when the person is maybe perhaps feeling more affinity towards one side and not the other. I mean, there's nothing bad with the person, and it's a completely normal thing. The other one is really relating to people pointing finger at the West, saying, well, look, French people, there's like there's some colonialism remaining in them because they're more closer to this side, and not maybe not feeling that much affinity to this side. I think a lot of this is just resentment, and I think I completely normally accept that this is the case. And yes, Europeans do feel more, being close to other Europeans. Doesn't mean they're not close to people of other cultures. It's just life. It's just how humans are. And we do exactly the same. Everyone does exactly the same. I mean, it just goes back to the same, is the only racism that happens is in Europe or in the West, and there's no racism everywhere else. Of course there isn't. I think it's just how, we mentally think now that there's Europeans have a unique kind of sense of, I think it's partially through Christianity, it's just a civilization driven on guilt, which, although allows for self-reflection, also does a lot of self-flagellation very well. Self-flagellation, I think they just whip themselves up unnecessarily, which is what happens. Now, it's not a concern for others yet, unless they kind of imbibe the Western's ways of thinking. But generally, it's not yet concern to other civilizations. We don't feel that much guilt, but it's quite peculiar to the West, which is both sort of racist and guilty about the fact that it is racist. So it's a little bit schizophrenic, yeah. But if we just stick to this, it's completely normal that. So if you don't have to correct yourself when you just say, I remember Turkey, but I didn't remember Syrians. Say yes, and it doesn't mean that we're cold towards them. And in fact, if somebody asks you to help, we should, which I think I will after this recording. So I again I wish speedy recovery to my Turkish brothers and sisters, and hope that God kind of saves them from further ruin, and there will be more development, and the people who are saved, or more people saved, and the people can rebuild their lives quicker. So with that, I say goodbye, and I think we'll talk about other subjects later on. Thank you very much.